Hey everybody, Stevie J with a quick update for UFC on Fox 8. Jorge Masvidal was able to make the weight after a second try with the allotted 2 hours additional time. Tim Means and John Albert did not make weight. Albert tried to weigh in a second time and was still over. Both have been fined 20% of their purse. With that update out of the way, here's the UFC on Fox 8 preview from Club Up or Shut Up by Peter H. and I, making our picks for tonight's fights. Join us at AngryMarks.com later this evening for the recap of the entire show from FX all the way through the Fox card.
That's what it is.
Mm-hmm. So anyway.
Yeah, Aaron Riley and Justin Salas. Another good fight. It's going to be, I don't know. It's too close for me to call, really, but I will mention that Aaron Riley is in the Hall of Fame of the Hook and Shoot organization.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool. He's been all over. Pride, IFL, Shodu, Bodog. He's been around.
That's why I said he's got 40 combined fights, and that's why I mentioned Hook and Shoot as well. But I almost feel a little sympathy towards Salas because he's fought locally twice now that I think I've seen both fights. The one he had for Victory Fighting 36 where he beat Jake Ellenberger's brother Joe, and the one where he beat Anton Quivanen by unanimous decision for the Sanchez Ellenberger card.
Gee, I wonder what show that was at. Let me think. Was that in Vegas?
No. I just said they were both here, Omaha and Council Bluffs. So the one was right here in my town, and the other was right across the river.
What's the name of the arena in Omaha again?
Okay, it's the CenturyLink now, but I still think of it as the Quest because that's what it was for years and years until they, the whole naming process. You got the Canadian Tire Scotiabank, so
No. Formerly Scotiabank, it's the Canadian Tire Center. However, they haven't put the sign up yet, so they're still calling it in on the papers as a joke. They're calling it Scotia Blank Place.
That's why I call it Canadian Tire Scotiabank because I figured that was more appropriate. We're still going to be calling it the Quest for another 5 years, so I feel your pain, buddy.
People still call it the Corral. I still call it the Corral Center. That was what his second name was, and that name lasted for years and years. But for the first year it was up, it was called the Palladium because it was built for the Senators. They wanted the whole Roman theme, and there's even the drive to get there, the road to get to the arena is called Palladium Drive. So the Palladium still exists in some way, shape, and form.
When I think of Palladium, I think of a cable network that came and went in the blink of an eye.
Oh. All right, let's talk the prelims on FX and not the score. What am I saying? Sportsnet 360. That's the name of it now. Speaking of naming rights, first fight: Julie Kedzie against Jermaine Randami. Speaking of fighters who've been around for a while, Kedzie's I think Ronda Rousey called her this week the pioneer of women's MMA. I think she wins here, and I think she does it decisively.
I've got every reason to pick her, and I've got one other besides the fact that she does the interviews and the commentary for Invicta Fighting. I see her at every show I go to in Kansas City. So again, it's kind of like she's the hometown favorite for me right now because she's always here.
We should have her on the show.
I'd love to. I should talk to our friend that does the interviews that set up Shannon Knapp and see if I can arrange that.
There you go. Speaking of friends of the show, our former guest, Ed Herman, against Trevor Smith.
Okay, well, I would like to pick Ed Herman, but at the same time, Short Fuse has been on the short end of the stick a few times, and not sure it's going to go his way in this one.
Yeah, it's going to be a very tough fight for both fighters. I think Herman wins, actually. I don't know how, but I think he does.
Okay, well, I'll stick with Trevor Smith because it's just right now I just feel like Ed Herman is not in the best position that he was maybe a few years ago on The Ultimate Fighter, and again, he was an awesome guest on our show, but sometimes that doesn't always reflect what's going to happen in a fight. It's one of those situations where I don't feel like Trevor Smith lost a whole lot losing to Tim Kennedy by guillotine choke because Tim Kennedy is going to beat a lot of people.
It's going to be interesting. Yves Edwards against Darren Cruikshank.
Yeah, that's another interesting fight. And normally when Yves Edwards comes up on this show and we're doing previews, I always favor him because he's the master of Thug Jitsu, and that's always been one of my favorite things about any fighter in any fight organization ever is when you're the master of Thug Jitsu. It's hard to go wrong with a title like that. The only other better title I've ever heard anybody be introduced as is when Dennis Hallman was introduced as the master of Cowboy Karate.
Or if you
It's
watched Joe Rogan back on News Radio, Joe Jitsu.
That's true. Yeah, Master of Jiu-Jitsu. That would be about the only thing other than that would be better. But it's tough because as much as I like Eve Edwards, he's just incredibly spotty. It's win-loss, 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 win-loss for him of late. So I don't know in this one because Cruikshank, he looked really good on the Ultimate Fighter, and I feel like there's a world of potential. And, you know, even when he fought Makdessi, who we talked about earlier in the news, it's not like he got smoked by Makdessi. He lost, but he lost it with decision. So
Yeah.
I feel like there's more in the tank for Cruikshank. And even though I'm a fan of Edwards, I'm going to actually pick Cruikshank.
I'm going to disagree. I think Edwards wins this one.
You think he bounces back again, huh? It's
I think
win-loss,
you do.
win-loss.
Yeah.
So I guess if you're following the pattern, you're probably right.
This card is very stacked because there's a lot of very interesting fights, like style versus style, and I mean this one, next one, I'm confused. I want to flip a coin for this one. Mac Danzig against Melvin Gillard.
Yeah,
Like,
and
wow.
That's the first of one that I don't even know how I can pick. We got 4 straight lightweight fights and they're all competitive, but that one might be the most competitive of all of them.
Yeah, to say the lightweight division is stacked, you're not kidding.
No doubt. Especially when they merged in the Strikeforce lightweight division into UFC. That it only got deeper once that happened.
Like, who do you got? I'm just on a whim. I'm gonna give it to the tough winner. I'm gonna give it to Mac Danzig.
Yeah, I'm tempted to go that way. And the fight record for Melvin Gillard suggests that's probably a safe bet because, again, this is another one of those situations where I'm in the same situation with Thug Jiu-Jitsu. Like, I love Melvin Gillard as a fighter. He's one of my favorites to watch, but it just seems like the record doesn't reflect how popular he is with me because he's lost 4 out of his last 5. So I guess I got to go with Mac Danzig, but I'd actually like to see Gillard win.
All right, another lightweight contest. Danny Castillo fights Tim Means.
I have a feeling you're picking Tim Means in this one.
Yes, I am.
Well, that's a pretty safe bet too, because other than his loss to George Masvidal or Jorge Masvidal, that seems to be an issue tonight with the show. I thought for sure it was George Santiago, and he didn't correct us when we had him on the air, but it's always changing because depending on what country you're from or what pronunciation you choose, it's different for every guy. But Jorge Masvidal was a tough loss for Tim Means, but he's still an up and comer in my eyes.
Yeah, but Castillo, that's I mean, of his last 5 fights, he's 4-1. Only lost to Michael Johnson. I mean, he's beaten Paul Sass, he beat John Cholish, Anthony Njokuani, Shamar Bailey.
See, that one I actually hold against him because I don't believe that he beat Anthony Njokuani in that fight.
That split decision. I remember that one. Yeah.
I thought for sure Njokuani won that fight, so I don't consider that a win for Castillo in my own personal history.
It's going to be a good fight. It's going to be a slobber knocker.
Yeah, I expect so too.
All right. Well, wrapping up the prelim card, we've got Ultimate Fighter winner Michael Chiesa against Jorge Masvidal.
Yeah, it's funny. We should just mention him because there he is again fighting Chiesa, and I'm gonna expect Chiesa to go out here and put on a guillotine choke.
I hometown fan are gonna be cheering Chiesa, that's for sure. But I'll give it to Chiesa. Why not? I think he surprises some people. I mean, we're gonna love to see him get that chokeout victory, but I mean, if he wins by knockout, I'd be just as happy.
Yeah, well, they'd be just as happy too, but he's on too much of a roll right now. I don't see it slowing down anytime soon.
All right, we'll go to the main card, and we've got Liz Carmouche against Jessica Andrade, which we talked about earlier, and I think Carmouche wins here, and it will only bolster the women's MMA division because this is going to be a great fight.
Absolutely. I wouldn't be surprised if she wins the fight by submission. I see more knockouts in Invicta, but they also have a lot of different weight classes and a lot of different kinds of fighters in Invicta. So it just seems to me that this fight is going to end probably by a submission, but you never know.
Robbie Lawler fights Bobby Volker.
That is a very tough welterweight fight for both of those guys. I'm going to let you pick first.
I'm going to go with Volker.
So, do you think the Cote fight makes any difference in that pick?
Yes and no. On one hand, Robbie Lawler, he's been a guy who, he's 31 years old, but I mean, he has been around for a while. He's this will be his 31st fight, so basically he's had a fight for every year he's been on the planet. And he won his last fight against Josh Koscheck. We saw the old Lawler back in the cage, but I mean, Bobby Volker, I mean, he's a tough character, and he needs a bounce back fight after the Cote fight. He wants to prove himself, so I think he catches Lawler, maybe with a hook, maybe with a jab, I don't know, but I think Lawler gets caught here.
No, I thought Lawler was kind of done before he came back to UFC, and the way he beat Josh Koscheck showed me that he's still got gas in the tank, so I'm going to be a believer and switch to the Robbie Lawler side of things, because he showed me something in that fight with Koscheck.
Yeah, I can see that, but you're basing that on Koscheck, who's lost 3 of his last 5.
Yeah, but I'm also basing that on the fact that at one time he was the Elite XC middleweight champion, and at one time he was considered one of the best in the middleweight division in the entire sport, not just in that promotion. So the fact that he showed that he still has power going down to welterweight, cutting weight, I actually think that favors him.
Well, I know we're going to have some discussion about this next fight, the semi-main event, which Stevie's even called in the past the main event of this show. Rory McDonald from Canada fights from Omaha, Nebraska, Jake Ellenberger.
Well, the reason I say that that's potentially the main event to a lot of viewers is because the fact that these two guys are both ranked in the welterweight division, and the winner of this fight is arguably the next contender for George St. Pierre's title.
True, we talked about fighters.
After Johnny Hendricks, of course.
Yes. It'd be interesting to see what happens in that fight for GSP Hendricks, because it's one of those things where we talked about fighters in the same camp fighting each other with Kane and Daniel Cormier. But if McDonald wins here and GSP wins here, we could see an all-Canadian fight for the welterweight title. And McDonald has been called the next GSP. I think McDonald wins this fight, neutralizes Ellenberger's power, takes him to the ground, and wins.
See, I respectfully disagree, because I think McDonald is every bit as good as you say he is and as people say he is. And I've thought he's a phenom ever since the first time I saw him fight. But Ellenberger has something that he's going to find incredibly difficult to deal with, and that's his wrestling ability, because people know Ellenberger for his knockout power, but he's no joke on the ground either. And people have always said that Ellenberger tires himself out fast by going for the knockout, but I think going in there with Rory McDonald, he's going to be very strategic and look to take him down and hold position and use his ground and pound to his advantage. I don't think he's going to go out there hoping to just hit a home run. I think Ellenberger fights a smart fight, and I think he finds a way to outpoint him in the end.
You think it's going to a decision?
I think so.
Wow. If that goes to a decision, wow. Because, I always say never leave it to the judges. If this one goes to a decision, I don't think they're going to leave it to the judges. I think they're going to go all out. If it goes to a third round, it's going to be a fight of the year contender, because they're both going to try to knock his head off.
Well, that's exactly why it'll end up going to a decision, because they'll be trying so hard in that third round that neither one of them will get the finish.
Oh, man. It's going to be – it has potential, and I hate saying that because sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But this fight has the potential for fight of the year. We're already halfway done the year. This fight could be in the top 3, if not the top 2 for fight of the year easily.
Well, it's got some pretty stiff competition going against both the Weidman Silva fight and the Brian Stan Vanderlei Silva fight. Both of those are fight of the year contenders in my eye.
That's definitely true. And we can't not talk about this show without talking the main event, and it's for the flyweight title. Still weird to say flyweight title in the UFC, but Demetrius Johnson defends his title against John Morega.
Yep. And John Morega is the man who says wrestling saved his life, so he, Chael Sonnen, and Iron Sheik should all do a panel together about saving wrestling, but it's a little tough for some of the viewers, because those of us who follow the prelims on Facebook and FX and Sportsnet and wherever else they might air have probably seen John Moraga, but I think a lot of your casual UFC viewers are going, who is this guy? They might know Demetrius Johnson because he had some great fights, but They probably don't know John Moraga, and that's why they need to watch this Road to the Octagon special, is get to know him, get to know why he says wrestling saved his life, get to know his backstory, and the fact that he's on a win streak and he's coming in to fight for the flyweight title. Get to know John Moraga. But that said, I still got to favor Demetrius in this because he is possibly the fastest human being alive. I mean, people say that about Henan Barao, and don't get me wrong, that guy is fucking faster than a hiccup. But at the same time, I sat cage side for his title fight with Dodson, and Dodson is fucking fast as hell too, and Demetrius was a half second ahead of him at every turn. It was one of the more amazing title fights I've ever sat through 5 rounds of, and I'm a Demetrius Johnson believer because the fact that he could go in there with Dodson and handle it, I don't think Moraga can touch him.
The only problem I have with this fight is the ranking system because you've got the number 4 fighter according to UFC going for the title.
Yeah, but I vote on those and I'm not complaining about it.
Well, I mean, Benavidez is 1, Dodson is 2, McCall, former guest on this show, is number 3, and then Moraga.
Well, McCall's not getting a title shot unless he gets a couple of wins under his belt, so I honestly have no problem with it. Again, it makes sense to me that they're giving somebody else a chance because they've only got like 11 fighters in the flyweight division to begin with, so at some point you gotta have the number 3 or number 4 because you're gonna have the number 1 and 2 only so many times.
Well, you brought up the rankings, Steve. I'm going to call you out on this. I'm going to call you to the carpet. You have Moraga number 6.
Well, I'm just not that blown away by the guy. I already said I don't think he's any faster than Demetrius Johnson. And again, that's no disrespect to him because he's got a great story. He's coming in to have a good fight here. But at the same time, I just believe that Demetrius is faster than him, more powerful than him. I love seeing the guy get a chance. I just don't think he has a good chance of winning. So I think my ranking reflects that.